Chapter, we're going to be going over forest management, and protected areas from the Essential Environment textbook. So, in this chapter, we're talking about forestry and forests, and I love this topic. Basically, when I was in Australia in the rainforest, a lot of people don't know there's a rainforest there. One of the things that some scientists were studying is how much water each individual leaf of a rainforest will gather from the clouds that sit there and cover the rainforest. And what they were estimating is that each day, each leaf in the rainforest that has this like central vein down the center will actually pull water from the clouds, like the fog that comes in, like the steam that you get in your bathroom, how it sticks to the mirrors. Well, the clouds will come and sit on the rainforest, and each leaf has like a waxy coating on the outside that acts like the glass mirror in your bathroom, and will actually pull the water out of the clouds that are there, and that water will then drip off the central vein and go down into different little puddles, streams, rivers that end up feeding the entire rainforest. So when a rainforest is cut down, a lot of the times the water actually leaves, and that's because rainforests aren't always raining, but rainforests are nearly always wet because of the clouds that come and sit on them every day, and the individual leaves pulling the water out of the clouds through this like condensation process. So every leaf of the rainforest is important, and that's why we need to keep it up. So rainforests are also, or all forests, not just rainforests, are really important because they also convert carbon from our air into things that we use, like wood, or they go through like a photosynthesis process, and that can create oxygen back into the air that we actually use. So it pulls carbon out and becomes a place to store carbon on land, so we don't have it in our atmosphere. We get water from it, we get wood from it, all kinds of different resources, habitats, etc. So this is a Vox video that I recommend watching. This is specifically, it's called The Destruction of the Rainforest Explained. So I recommend that one as part of this series. Then a lot of different parts of the world, like when I was in Borneo, it is being deforested there, and for specifically palm oil there, but it can also be for ranching, soy, sugar, corn, all these different crops. And so these old growth forests where it's got very old trees are being replaced with these like quick growing, like in the case of Borneo, like palm oil trees, so that the people can get the money from the oil that's in there. This creates a loss of biodiversity. There's higher death rates with the indigenous people. And of course, losing all of that contributes to our climate issues that we see. Brazil over time has strengthened its own forest code and asked landowners in the Amazon to conserve 80%, and rural landowners to conserve 20% of their rainforest to protect it. And like I said earlier, a rainforest isn't the only type of forest. There can be boreal forest, tropical rainforest, temperate deciduous, temperate forest, and tropical dry forests. So forests are basically classified based on their tree types that they have. And this is more of the forest that you would expect in, maybe Southern California, though this one here is in Michigan. We have a lot of pines in our forests down here. So forests in general cover about 31% of the Earth's surface. And there's different parts of a forest. I need to stop saying rainforest, but of a forest. The top part is the canopy, and then underneath there is the sub canopy because it's below, understory, and then the forest floor and the soil. There's also can be gaps in the trees where nothing is growing. The important purpose of understanding this is that there's different animals and different organisms that will live at every level. So every level of the forest gets used by different animals and creatures, so it all becomes important. Specifically, in a rainforest, there's not very good nutrients in the actual soil. What gives the trees a lot of their nutrients is simply the sunlight that's available there, but the water coming through will give it a lot of minerals and things like that. But the water also leaches nutrients out of the soil. So trees have a lot of purpose. They'll stabilize the soil and help draw up water. They will also intercept like different leaves and leaf litter will stop water from becoming or slow it down on the way to a stream or river so that it can seep into the ground. Okay, so like I said before, forests serve as a major carbon reservoir or a carbon sink where a lot of carbon from our earth is stored. Also, 25% of the medicine in the world is coming from various rainforest plants. Take that in for a minute. Like 25% of our current medicines. So for things that have no cure yet, it would be kind of a safe bet to assume that about 25% of the new discoveries will come out of the rainforest. Like, what cures are out there that we don't even know about yet before it is deforested? So, deforesting is clearing the land faster than the land can regrow the space. So, a lot of people don't know that there is actually logging here in the United States. This is another video that I recommend, and it's called Logging in Western Oregon. I would check it out if you are able to. It's on YouTube to see some of the logging that's happening here in the United States. Then, this is another really good video called The War on Amazon's Most Valuable Trees. It's also on YouTube, and it's a really good video to explain how trees are being targeted. Okay, so primary forest is forest that's natural and it's older and it's left undisturbed. So primary forest is very high value forest because it's like old wood that's been there for a long time. So this is what our country looked like in 1620. The maps of early primary forest. Now that was nearly 100% taken down, except in the West, which people, took a long time to make their way over this way. But today we only have the dark green primary forest is left. Now we have regrown some secondary forest, but these are all like newer, younger trees, with most of it not having spaces where it's like trees that are over 100 years old type of spaces. Okay, so this is what you would expect a primary growth forest to look like. It's going to have different age trees, different species, and it's just going to be like really staggered and kind of like pretty, almost like looks kind of dreamy, pretty, like it would be in a fairy tale. A secondary growth forest will tend to be one that looks more like this, where it has all the same trees called a monoculture that are all about the same age, because this was either clear cut and then replanted, or it burned down and then it came back. So again, secondary or a primary growth forest and a secondary growth forest. So the reason why it's important to have a primary growth forest is there's some animals that specifically rely on old growth wood, and one of them is this hornbill that I studied while I was in Borneo. And this hornbill, I have a couple great videos to watch. Inside Look at the Hornbill's Nest by BBC Studios, and the next one is Rhinoceros Hornbill Female Leaving the Artificial Nesting Box. These guys will live about 100 years, and they have a breeding partner, And for decades, some of them have been flying around in Borneo, unable to breed because they can't find a proper nest. So they've been looking for holes. And then there's different scientists that have been trying to build fake nesting habitats that they've had some success with hornbills going into. But the hornbill, she'll actually go inside of a slit in an old growth forest or tree, and she'll go inside, hollow it out, and stay in there for a really long time while she raises her baby, with the male just bringing her food, and then with her bringing the baby food later. So she will hide there for a long time. So without the proper space, they just won't breed. And they're getting past breeding age, and so we need to get some babies out of these guys. So this is more on just logging. This is areas that have been clear cut or have been like experiencing a net loss, like this orange and red in their forests, and some are having a gain. So Brazil, this is what it is looking like over time with their forest loss between 1975 and 2018. There's a really good video here about by Vox with indigenous people that are protecting the forest. I recommend watching it in Brazil. So different conservation organizations really work to try to save these different areas. I worked with one. These are women that work in Hutan in Malaysia, and they actually work for, it's the equivalent of US getting paid $5,000 a year to replant trees all day long. So I got to go out and work with them and replant all these little baby trees that you can see in the foreground. But they work really hard in over 100-degree weather and tons of mosquitoes doing this every day. And this is what they're up against, is really fighting like the palm oil plantations that make the people a lot of money, but it's a monoculture where every single one of the trees is the same, and animals like the hornbill and many, many other species are not able to use this because it's imported from Africa and not a Malaysian plant. This little center white part, I just cut one of these open. This is what they're after, is that tiny little bit of oil in the middle of the palm seed. Here's some elephants, some pygmy elephants from Borneo. They're super hard to see, but these elephants are one of the animals that live there that are so awesome to see. Here's some of the hornbill boxes that different scientists were making. And here in one of the nature preserves of the forest is a hunting blind that's totally illegal that we walked up on one day, showing you that some hunting, this is where hunters go and hide so they can sneak up on animals. This is something that's totally illegal and not supposed to be there in that rainforest. And some of the different animals, the kingfisher, orangutans, monitor lizards, etc., that we worked with there, or studied, I should say. This is from the canopy in an old growth forest. You can see that this is a primary forest because there's several different species. And I was up in that canopy photographing people that were down on like a touristy bridge that day and looking at things. And here are the palm oil trucks that I was behind, and the orangutans that rely on having a very differentiated forest in order to be able to live in. So forests, there are lots of places that are using forests in very sustainable ways. This is a cool infographic about how European forests are being replanted in a very sustainable way for use of the people and regrown in those areas. So let me move to this one. Okay, so we have in the United States, we have about 90% of our forests are on private land, meaning people can decide because they own this land if they're going to use it for timber or not. The Forest Service, they do allow some trees to be harvested on our public lands. Only about 2% is harvested each year. On our forest land, But the Forest Service actually sells the timber below its own costs, which means you as a taxpayer are actually subsidizing people to cut down the forest because you're paying to make that happen. Um, when they go and replant trees, or they have like tree farms, they will plant usually the same type of tree and they'll plant it in these long rows like this. And you can see that it just doesn't look as natural as, say, this, which is like a natural forest, which gives animals and other plants a lot of diverse places to like live in micro ecosystems there, instead of this where it just doesn't look natural at all and it's just considered monoculture. So there's a few different ways that wood is harvested from these places. One is clear cutting. Clear cutting means they just go in and they literally cut down everything and they log the whole thing at once. This is a very inexpensive way to do it, but obviously there's a ton of environmental damage from cutting down the entire forest all at once. There's other approaches, like they can leave a seed tree where they leave like an adult tree, or a shelter tree where they leave a few big trees around to protect newer growing ones, or they can do selection systems where they just go around and tie off and select which trees they want to do. These are all better methods for the environment than clear cutting, but all of them are more expensive than just clear cutting. So another thing that forests are kind of up against is fires. And fires can be good and fires can be bad for an area. Now, firefighters a lot of times will have prescribed burns or light backfires to an area that hasn't burned in a while to prevent it from having even a bigger burn or a worse burn, so they can do controlled fires, or to be a block for a fire that's coming in a certain direction. They will burn everything that's, ahead of it in its path so that they can control the fire coming up. So when you see this, sometimes I think this gets bad publicity that firefighters are actually starting fires, which is true, but usually it's for the maintenance and protection of the area. We are increasing in wildfires everywhere. Another thing that forests are up against is that by having warmer, drier climate, we've actually had a an outbreak of bark beetles. Bark beetles are worse because right now, and they burrow into the tree and they essentially kill it, and their eggs kind of grow and they'll kill the tree over time. But the bark beetles have actually gotten worse lately because we don't have the cold weather that we are used to that would normally kill them off. So there are some places that try to sell at least some sustainable wood, and so it gets this marking on it when you buy lumber. I just happened to look and I saw that Home Depot does have a whole area of their website dedicated to their sustainable practices, which is a good step in that direction. So the United States, of course, has national parks to protect some of our spaces. And here's some more information on that. In California, we do have, well, let me talk about these separately. National wildlife refuges are areas where you can do hunting, fishing, photography, and things like that. Not commercial, but you can do it privately. We also have the Wilderness Act, which allows some places to be designated as like wildlife areas. And then California has a whole list of wilderness areas that we have. Areas are also protected by some people who go in and buy an area and make a land trust. Up in Big Sur, this is a gorgeous area that is part of a trust, and so it's protected. And up there, I go up and visit. It's really cool. There's a lot of California condors that live right up by here and do their hunting. Now, we have a lot of turkey vultures in our area, which have the white on the ends of their wings, whereas condors are a little bit bigger and they have the white more towards their breast or the front of their wings. So the official target was to, by 2020, to have about 17% of our land and 10% of our marine areas protected. Out in like some areas of the world, especially third world countries, they have a lot of national parks on paper, but it's hard because it takes a lot of money and people and resources to protect those spaces. So again, like the blind that was at the hunting blind that was in a protected space that was illegal, these are called paper parks because they exist on paper, but in reality they're not treated any differently than any other space in the area. And this is a sun bear that was it's highly endangered, and it, you know, we found it in like a cage that somebody was trying to capture it and sell it, probably as a pet or for food. There's also some parks called Biosphere Reserves, and these have a core center that's highly protected, an outside buffer area where the indigenous people tend to live and more people can go, more trails, etc. And then a transition zone on the outside where you can have some commerce, a little bit of housing, and then before it gets to the big city. So it kind of gets increasingly more protected as it goes towards the center. There's also some areas called World Heritage Sites. I got to go to the one in Tikal, but there's ones in just south of us in Mexico and in Guatemala, Honduras, Belize, that are all connected. And these forests and areas get extra protection because they're heritage sites. They're like historical sites for the people. And that also leads to some protection for the animals and plants. Habitat fragmentation, we've talked about this before, but it's like the fragmented land that gets broken up into different spaces. As things get more fragmented, it becomes increasingly more important that we make preserves where it's not fragmented, because there's certain animals, and I have like a picture of a bird here. The bird here, if it has a nest that's vulnerable to predators, it wants to be on the inside of the forest, not living on the outside. But in this kind of forest, everything is the outside of the forest. So it's important to have places that are intact. And the last video that I recommend is from HHMI, and it's called Seed Dispersal and Forest Fragmentation.